So this will be part 5 in this video series. Sorry about the light coming in, but the only real fitment thing that I'm running into at this point is the way the hood meets this core support. And it's only a problem because this bracket, which supports, I guess it's the oil cooler and transmission cooler, is too big and in the way. So I'm going to trim this off to start with, take out probably down to this line, and eliminate this upper half of this thing. I'm still debating on whether I want to keep the AC components because I don't plan to run air conditioning in this truck, at least not at this point. So I may be able to even pull this out, the condenser, and do something else with this piece. But for now I'm just going to trim off this and get it out of the way. I've mocked up the cab and I've dropped screwdrivers. Let me see that one or not. The sun's kind of, there it is. Dropped screwdrivers through the frame, or through the cab mounts, to show where they line up on the frame. So the front ones are square on the frame and the rear ones are just inside the frame. That's not a problem. I mean, I'll just have to come up with a mount that has an ear on it that comes over and supports that. I've got a gap between the gas tank and the back of the cab, which is good. Everything is level to the frame. Here's the other screwdriver, makes it a little more clear. You can see that. This will be real easy to make this perch. And then the driver's side, or passenger side, there's a handle. Again, coming down and hitting the frame, and I can square that up to show where it's really hitting that. So the passenger side is going to be pretty easy to fab up some mounts. The driver's side will take a little more work because of the brake lines and stuff like that in the way, as you can see there. So I may have to reroute some things, but that's all part of it whenever you're building something custom. The fenders line up pretty well in this core support. I'll have to weld a tab, and I'm going to bolt right to that. Same thing on the passenger side. And I've got the core support. I got this block here to hold the, because since there's nothing holding the core support in place, just to kind of give me some space to show where it's at. I may not have to lower this thing like I thought about, you know, the dropping the core support down a little bit. I think it's going to ride out okay. The other thing I'm going to run into problems is these parking lights, because the parking lights themselves are pretty deep and there's no room to fit them in there. Here's one back here. You can see that's a pretty deep gap and that's a pretty narrow space, and there's just not going to be enough room to make that thing fit. So I may have to custom make some parking lights out of these things, but that'll come later. For now I want to get the cab mounts made and get this thing sitting comfortably on the frame and make sure this hood closes. Alright, so I still have fitment problems with the hood closing. Actually hitting part of this right here and catching a little bit right here. So I may end up having to drop the core support down a little bit to make this clearance. I'm going to show you it's close, but it's just a little bit, can't really show you, just a little bit of fitting problem. So I'll figure that out, but in the meantime I decided to build some cab mounts, and you're gonna like this. At least I hope you will. This is what's left of the frame section I cut out, which was 23 inches on either side. And what I've done is I took the cab mounts from the old chassis, and they're a little beat up, but that's okay, I can get new ones later. I'm just doing this to fabricate. I cut out a section of steel off of the old frame piece, pretty thick stuff. It's about 4 inches wide and I don't know, 7 inches long. And then I burned a hole, and this is where a plasma cutter comes in real handy. I burned a hole so that will sit down inside just like it was designed on the old chassis. And I'm gonna have to trim this part down a little bit. It's a little bit fatter than the opening, but I can remedy that. So let me just show you how that worked out. I have the passenger side tacked up, or actually mostly buzzed in, but there it is, and I like it. Now I could come back later and add some support bracing in those open areas, and I'm going to weld more on it, but I think that's going to work. And I may be able to do something similar for the back. I'm still figuring that out. Of course, I have to deal with that cross member issue and everything else, but yeah, making progress. Okay, so I pulled the cab back off, and just to show you, there's the front cab mount, and I think that's going to work out really good. And like I said, I may add a gusset maybe on this side to strengthen that up a little bit, but that stuff, that's so thick, I don't feel like that's going to bend at all, but I may do that. In the back, just to show you this is again that piece of frame that I cut up, and I squared it and got it located, and it's welded on. The rear cab mounts on this original truck were a bit different looking. They had these, you know, biscuit kind of shape, and they had this real long shaft here, and then this piece slid over that, and then this real long bolt went up through the floor, up through that mount, I should say, this direction, and went into the cab mount, which is back here, right there. So with what I have to work with, I decided to reuse these mounts. But what I did is, let's see if I can show you a good angle, I cut it down. I took cut off that much from this piece inside, and then I trimmed off that much of the rubber piece, and that's nothing but rubber anyway. And I know it's supposed to take up some of the vibration, but now with that in place, I'll be able to run a bolt up, and I don't believe it'll affect any interference with this frame. What I find interesting with this, I'm getting tar all over my gloves, is these bolts, when I pulled them out, are just covered in tar, and even on the inside of the mount, it's got tar. And I don't know if that was supposed to be like a hopeful rust preventive or what, but it just made a mess. You know, it's leaking out from where I cut it, and just kind of makes it hard to not get it all over my camera. So what I'm going to do is focus on building a similar thing over there, and I've got a location picked out. I made sure I had dropped the screwdriver down through the hole to verify, and it's actually that mark right there. So it'll be a little trickier with this tank in the way, and I may not be able to do it exactly the same way, but I'll come up with something. Okay, that worked out pretty good. I basically duplicated what I had here as far as length and angles, and then I compared it to the other side, and I cut off excess material as needed using the plasma cutter, which, man, I'm so glad I got that thing. That makes this so much faster. So now I can set this on the other side, and I'll show you that in a minute. But what I also wanted to show you was, you know, with our modern phones and technology, right in our hands we have stuff like a bubble level. So I can verify that my side to side is level, and I can verify my angle. And all I have to do is replicate that on the other side. I already have my hole center. I already know where it's supposed to be based on my previous mark. So I'll get this in place, and that'll take care of the location of the rear mounts. And just let me show you how I trim this. So my mark is down here. All I have to do is get that positioned. And if I had 3 hands, I'd show you the bubble level thing again, but I'm not. So I've got some clearance around the gas tank. It's bigger than it looks, really. And I think that'll take care of the rear mounts. So from there, once I get this in place, I'm going to go back to shortening the exhaust, the right bank. I need to get that catalytic converter up closer to this one so that I can do my exhaust the way I want. And then I'll work on that crossmember thing. I'll also finish welding the front mounts and decide whether I want to add any more bracing to those. I'm thinking they're pretty solid. We'll see. And that may take care of the bulk of the cab mount. And then I'll deal with the other stuff later with the fitment of the hood and core support. Okay, so there's the left rear cab mount welded in. And I've got this crossbar welded in that I'm going to use for the carrier bearing. What's really cool, and I think somewhat funny, is this piece of pipe was just laying in my metal pile, and it was the exact width that I needed. I thought that was funny. Didn't have to trim it or anything, just pulled it out of the pile and used it. Now I also took a couple pieces of that leftover frame and made some, standoffs so I can get it up a little bit. And the reason I did that was to clear the exhaust on that side. And I'll still have to shorten up that pipe like I had said, but and if I hadn't said this before, I must say it again, that the plasma cutter is just awesome. This is that plate. Well, there's all the pieces and parts from that piece of pipe that ran across underneath where this new pipe is, from there over to that location. This is the plate that I need to support the carrier bearing. And so I'm not going to put it in this direction, I'm just showing you. I'll be able to weld that on nice, and it'll definitely do exactly what I want. I'm going to install it this direction, but just to show you how nice it's going to fit. I'm pretty happy with that. And I've already double checked. I'm right about on the money as far as height. I measured off of this cross member before. I kind of held it in place and got a measurement. It's about 4.5 inches from the cross member to the bottom of this plate. So I'll just turn that around, square it, buzz that on, and that's going to take care of the carrier bearing and the cab mounts. And then I think all I have left is the exhaust. Yeah, it's moving right along. Well, I got the plate in for the carrier bearing. I cut down the exhaust. I ended up cutting out this length of pipe here from this pipe, and I cut the flange off of the end and relocated it back here. And now this section of pipe will bolt directly to this one, and I'll end up trimming off the end of it. It's still long, but that'll be somewhere in this range, which the back of the cab, if I remember, yeah, it's right about here. So as long as I'm in this range, it'll be fine for the exhaust. Other than that, I'm just going to do a little more cleanup work. I tried to grind off or cut off some of these pieces left over from the old cab mounts, but if I really want them off, they're gonna have to come off with a grinder because it's like they're fusion welded on somehow. I tried to salvage this one to make a cab mount out of for the back, and I cut way down in that thing and it's still welded. So probably more work than it's worth. So I'll just grind them down a little bit, smooth up the edges so there's nothing to catch a hand on, and do like I did there, and just put some primer on them. I'm getting ready, just about ready to mount the cab back up. I still have to play with those fuel lines a little bit. I still don't like those. I did have a YouTuber suggest some copper fittings, and I need to resolve that before I completely commit to mounting the cab back up. But I'm pretty happy. Things have progressed really well. I think this is technically day 7. Yeah. So 7 days I've been working on this. And I think next week I'll be driving it down the road if I can continue this pace. And that takes care of the gas lines. 2 3/8 unions or couplers. And that's much better. I like that a lot more. Now the only other thing is they're close to this new cab mount that I built. So I will take a piece of hose and split it and push it around that. Maybe put some black tape around it or something so that it has less chance of hitting on this new cab mount. Other than that, everything else is ready to go. I got the exhaust put back together, cut off that length, so now I should have enough room to make the turn down and out and up for the stacks. And other than placing this main wire bundle, getting it routed, which can come later really, because the cab, there's all kinds of room underneath and it's just going to need a loop anyhow. Other than that, I'm about ready to set this cab back on, maybe for the last time. I'm liking it. I think this will be the end of this video, and I will progress into the next one. And thanks for watching. This has been a fun project.